So an historic good afternoon to you. Happy 125th birthday, Coquitlam. It is a great day in the park and a wonderful thing to celebrate. My name is Mark Forsyth, and I'm here because I want to be and because I'm really interested in storytelling. I used to work at CBC Radio, and that's what we did every day. For me, for about 30 years, and also constructed a few different books with our listeners, too. And their story contributions were such an important part to that. And one of the books, most recently, From the West Coast to the Western Front, which is about British Columbia and the First World War, we have copies of that on sale here at Black Bond, and copies of books from all of the other storytellers who are published writers as well. They're signed, and please do peruse Black Bond. It's great to have them here, an independent local bookseller. And also Cafe Devano, they have fantastic coffee. They're serving up wine. They have some baked goods. You can even get some really good beer that I must try, Yellow Dog and Moody's Ales. They're over by the main plaza. There's a little brew pub, if you will. So please check that out as well. Something I'm really impressed with as I wander around the park is actually the recycling on site. It is so well organized. I wish we had that kind of recycling everywhere, including where I live in Fort Langley. It would be nice to have it so simple and straightforward. And we want to thank one of our sponsors here, because West Coast Plastic Recycling is doing this. They're doing a remarkable job. They're keeping plastics from the landfill and from our oceans, and they're making sure the plastic goes into remanufacturing, creating new products. So good on you, West Coast Plastic Recycling. They have won the Consumer Choice Award for Best Recycling Centers and Services for the last 5 years, and it's for a very good reason, too. Now, storytellers, that's who you want to hear from. We have two storytellers over the course of the next 40 minutes or so who are going to take us through Coquitlam's story from then to now. And I'll give you a moment here to step back in time in your mind and discover the Coquitlam history through the historical characters, the figures who are part of this community's history. And we have a very distinguished guest with us today to speak of the history of transportation and Coquitlam. And I'm going to give you some clues about him. They call him the Colonel. You might know who that is already. He was born back in 1813. He was born in Bridgetown, Barbados, to Mary Clement and Thomas Moody. And he married Mary Susanna Hawkes in 1852 in England. They had 12 children, and Mary Hill over here is named in her honor. She deserved at least that after bearing 12 children, to have a hill named in her honor, and the bypass as well. He was professor of fortifications at Woolwich Military Academy back in 1838. And then he became the governor of the Falkland Islands, governor to a lot of sheep and a few British subjects, I would think. Governor of Malta in 1954, and then he gets closer to us in the mid-1850s. The British Columbia gold rush has erupted on the Fraser River, and there's a lot of shenanigans going on. And he is colonel of the Royal Engineers here in the colony of British Columbia, even before it was a colony, actually, right up to 1858, between that period and 1863. He has a Tri-City named after him as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce to you Col Moody.
Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome everybody to this gathering place. It's great to be here, great to be gathered in this place with you. And to begin with, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the territory of the Coast Salish people. When I first came in 1858, I brought with me my wife, who is the mother of my 12 children. We came with 2 servants and 4 of our children. The oldest one at that time was 5 years old. Her name was Stephanie. Not Stephanie, that was the other one. Her name was Josephine. Josephine was the oldest child that we had, and she was the older sister of the 3 younger brothers that came with us. We came because, as Mr. Forsyth has indicated, there was this gold rush on the Fraser River. And the gold rush was drawing people from around the world, particularly the Americans, who found that the San Francisco gold rush of 1849 had come to a complete halt, and they ran out of where to find gold, and they heard this rumor about new gold discoveries along the Fraser River. So about 30,000 of them rushed up across the 49th parallel, which had been already set into place by another detachment of the Royal Engineers, and they started settling in places like Hope, Boston Bar, Spence's Bridge, and were working on the waters of the river to uncover, to prospect, and mine for gold. Well, at that time, the governor of the colony of British Columbia and the colony of Vancouver Island was James Douglas. And he was getting a little bit concerned about so many Americans coming up from the south. He was concerned that some of the Americans were in favor of buying Alaska up north. And with these Americans on 3 sides of the colonies, he wanted some reinforcements to bring and to make sure that British rule and law and order and governance were in the name of the British Empire. Now, we need to keep in mind that Colonel Moody and James Douglas were from 2 very different backgrounds. James Douglas was an entrepreneur. He was the chief factor of the fur trade and very much had a sense of business and enterprise on his mind and in his psyche. Colonel Moody, on the other hand, as you have heard from Mr. Forsyth, very much had a different kind of perspective on community life, being the governor of Falkland Islands, the governor of Malta, and being especially chosen by the colonial secretary, Mr. Lytton, in London, England, to come with the 149 Royal Engineers to provide the infrastructure into the colony. And so there was occasion when the 2 visions for the colonies clashed. But Colonel Moody, when he arrived on December 25th, 1858, his first assignment was to quell the war that was known as the Pigs' War between the San Juan Islands and the Americans there and the British. He had to quell the Ned McGowan's War, which was happening in the Fraser River Valley. And he also took the opportunity to look at where James Douglas had set aside the capital of the colony of British Columbia, which was in Derby, which was Mr. Forsyth's hometown. And he said, no, that's not the place where a capital ought to be of the new colony. It's too close to the American border. It's too accessible and too vulnerable to the Americans on the south side of the Fraser River. And so he decided to move it. He moved it from Derby to a place that would be called New Westminster. And it was on the other side of the river. It had a much more broader view of the Fraser River and what might be coming across the Fraser River from the south. James Douglas didn't particularly buy that because Colonel Moody made that decision unilaterally. When we arrived as a family and as Royal Engineers, we did settle in New Westminster. We cleared the land of bush and discovered that because James Douglas wasn't prepared for Colonel Moody and all the Royal Engineers, there was nothing to live in but a tent. And so Colonel Moody and his family and the servants lived in a tent for a year and a half before the Royal Engineers were able to build a proper government house that was on the north side of the river and is now known, as I understand my geography, Sapperton. And that's where the provincial jail was at one time and is now a high-density community, as well as a cemetery further up the hill. So those were a little bit of the backstory of Colonel Moody's coming to the colony. And a significant part of his responsibility was to not only offer governance, but to offer construction of buildings and the construction of trails and roads. And that's what I want to focus on for the next couple of minutes, is that the roads that Colonel Moody oversaw with his Royal Engineers played a significant part in the life of the Tri-Cities and as well as, importantly, Coquitlam. One of the first roads that they built was North Road, which became known as North Road. From Sapperton in New Westminster, straight north, along the edge of what became known in 1891, the city of Coquitlam, that separated Coquitlam and Burnaby, up over the hills and down the valleys and up over the Burnaby Mountain to come out at Burrard Inlet. And there, the recognition that this road had a destination by the survey ship of the HMS Plumper. The captain was George Henry blank. His name is completely gone, but George Henry was his first two names, and it wasn't George Henry Plumper. But anyway, he named that point of where the trail and the water met as Port Moody. Now, the significance of North Road I'll get to in a couple of minutes, but that wasn't the only road he built. He built Kingsway Avenue and set aside a part of Stanley Park as a military reserve. He built Cumberland Road from New Westminster across the hill over into Burnaby Lake, and he also was involved with building the road south of Coquitlam along the Dudney Trunk Railroad and the Caribou Road from Hope on its way up to the Caribou and Klondike Gold Rush. I find it, as I think of history, that the building of North Road played a significant part in the life of the identity of Coquitlam. Because now, as I stand before you and step into the future in character, we know that North Road is not just a trail. We know that it's a major link of transportation from the Fraser River in the south to the Burrard Inlet in the north. And it was built as a military access in case the Americans did arrive from the south and across the frozen river of the Fraser River, the frozen water of the Fraser River, that where were they going to get their military ammunition? Well, the Burrard Inlet provided that opportunity, and it would have been an access for those provisions. But it never happened. Someone was telling me this morning that what the road and trail was used for was for provisions for the providing the needs of Fraser Mill along the Fraser River, where the railroad eventually met, and the Dooney Trunk Railroad and the Lougheed Highway and the Trans-Canada Highway now reside. So the North Road provided that significant place of transportation, of identity for the city of Coquitlam. And as we know now, it's more than just a corridor for cars and other buses and other motor vehicles. It's a significant transportation corridor for the SkyTrain, and that will be unveiled and be running in the next few months. So these roads, I just imagine, if you could imagine with me out of historical context, that with the news that there will be driverless cars in the near future, that will become more and more popular. There might even be use of North Road for those kinds of vehicles. And who knows, the introduction of drones might find that the North Road is a particularly important transportation corridor. And I would imagine that now the young people are using their Pokemon Go apps to highlight the value of not only that transportation corridor, but many others as well. So that's a little bit of the significant story that I wanted to leave with you today about as we go about celebrating 125 years of the city of Coquitlam, and how the Royal Engineers made that a significant part of their contribution, their legacy to who we are and how we are to be one with another in Coquitlam. In concluding, I'd like to invite anybody who may have any kinds of questions about the Royal Engineers, about Colonel Moody, about what I have said, that you may want to add something to it. And let's see what happens with a bit of a dialogue with question and answers. When I put that up there, are there any comments or questions that anybody might have? Well then, oh yes, there's... The question was that, did Colonel Moody ever live in Port Moody? No, he didn't move from New Westminster to Port Moody. In fact, he never did actually step into the territory that is now known as the city of Port Moody. It was named by, the city was named by that survey ship captain, and the closest that Colonel Moody got to Port Moody was the edge of North Road. But he lived in New Westminster and spent a lot of time traveling into the interior, going to Hope and up the Fraser River to Yale to, as I said, quell the Ned McGowan's War. And he also took the paddle wheeler over to Victoria from time to time, especially when they found that the mosquitoes were so dense and so unbearable in New Westminster that Mary had to take her family over to to Victoria. The other thing is that when Colonel Moody left after 5 years in the colonies in 1863, he left with his 2 servants, his wife, and not just 4 children, but 7 children. 3 of his children, 3 of his daughters were born in New Westminster. And then the other 5 of the 12 were born in southern England when he got back to England. And his resting place is in Bournemouth, Dorset, in St. Peter's Cemetery, St. Peter's Church in Bournemouth. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Scott. How did I like Barbados? I loved Barbados. I was only there for a few years before I was sent to England for military training at the Woolwich Academy. And there I was sent when I was age 14 and lived the rest of my teen years in that military academy. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Forsyth, and ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Thank you so much, Colonel Moody, for everything you've done for this province. Before you go, I've been asked to give you a special commemorative Coquitlam 125 pin to add to your regalia and all the medals that are at home. I see you're not wearing them today, but thank you so much. Congratulations for everything that you did. And it's so important to hear stories like that. Canadian history is so rich and varied, and we need to hear more stories like Colonel Moody's, and you've come to the right place, the Story Cafe.